but happy to please have your engagement. So please do so. And yes, thanks, Howard. Glad you're safe down in Cape Town, and hope you had a fantastic trip. I'm sure you did, through the Karoo and all the little towns. And yeah, it's good to see you back. It's awesome.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, it was a fantastic ride. I'm sure you guys know that the only time I forget about data is when I'm on the back of a bike. So it was 3 days when I really didn't pay much attention to what was going on in the data world. And now we're back, so that's fantastic. And you're right, it was an interesting suggestion on or challenge in terms of how do we get data executives to work on DQ. So that's the session for today, and it's a very practical one. Again, I hope it's practical. I thought last one was very practical, and I thought I'd have a lot more engagement. So hopefully today, with a smaller group, we can have a few more discussions. So it's all about data executives, DQ for data executives. We spoke about the essential concepts and that we source everybody. Then we went on to managing trust from a data manager's point of view. What do they have to do to manage the trust in the organization? We spoke about the data citizens expecting trust. How do they define the data quality expectations that they have of data? And the more we understand it as professionals, the better we are able to attempt to achieve that expectation. Not always to say that we will, but we need to know when we're not. I think that's important. And then the data management professionals, they sort of have the framework that the manager set up. They have the expectations that the citizen has defined, and now they have to achieve the trust. They have to get the data to that level of trust. And then the data executives is a little bit harder in terms of communicating with management, communicating with business, and constantly explaining why we need data quality. And I think it's easy to say that we do see scenarios where data quality programs have failed, data governance programs have failed, and we always ask ourselves the question why. And a lot of the times it's due to stakeholder buy-in, where the stakeholders haven't seen the value of what's been produced. And I think that's certainly where the CDO, the CIO, the governance manager, the EIM manager, they have to ensure that it's communicated correctly. I always remember Paul Grobler in our master data course that we've just finished kept on saying, if you can express master data by means of not calling it master data, but by a business case, then you probably got more reason or more chance for success. So data quality is a similar one. And I read several interviews done by Dylan on Data Quality Pro with people that have achieved trust or achieved the data quality program within their organization. And it keeps on coming back. The message keeps on coming back is how well does the executive impress upon the need to business as to the requirement for data quality. Okay, so that's got to be critical. That's got to be the most important thing. And I think we had a really nice presentation from Marita on Monday about the business model, and I've used some of that thinking just to explain how I do it by using a data strategy, and I'll show you how we put it together. Okay, so this was data quality. These are the essential concepts. I'll keep on reviewing them. I think it's important that we all understand what are the goals of data quality, what are the business drivers to increase the value of the data, to reduce the risks, to improve organizational efficiency, and to protect the organization's reputation. So you may have seen on the teaser that Debbie sent out those important questions that we raised that the executive has to take care of. Go through the life cycle. That's not really critical at the exec level. These are important principles. Of course, the critical data needs to be identified, and that's how the exec starts to sell that when he sees challenges with the critical data and the data is insufficient to provide the critical answers. And this is where we said we wanted to focus and have the data supporting the measurements and focus on the business strategy. And I keep on saying this is the critical area that we can relate to. Our data quality dimensions, we had a nice chat about that last week where we took the data quality dimensions on BQ and we applied it to all of the other knowledge areas, and we showed you the level of detail in terms of building a data modeling scorecard or a data governance scorecard or a metadata scorecard, whichever it is. We can make use of the data quality dimensions to understand how well we are doing and the quality of our programs, our different practices that we set up. And these are helpful to make use of. There was quite a bit of drill down of detail in terms of this. Again, it's helpful whenever we want to improve data and want to get better at the quality of our data, that we can break it down to a level that's measurable. Just saying we need good quality data is not enough. There's certainly expectations that we should have fantastic data. Why have we got bad data? And then when we break it down to these levels of dimensions, underlying concepts and metrics, we start seeing why we're battling and why we don't have enough information. Okay, so again, guys, make sure you understand and you can explain these different dimensions. It was a really nice interaction that we had with Dama India, where we spoke about the different qualities, the different dimensions, and certainly one starts to see that there's so many different ways in which we can provide the same dimension but with different names, and it's good to standardize on what we call them, and that everybody in the company is aware of what they mean. And I'm sure just by taking a look at it, you guys can see that we need to learn a little bit more about these quality of dimensions and the concepts, and then of course the interaction between the dimensions. This is the life cycle stage. Di did a fantastic job, and it was really nice to sync up with her in terms of what she's learned and her favorite people, or the people that she's learned from enough as much. We spoke of Duran and Edward Deming, who provides a Deming cycle. We spoke of John Zachman, who breaks it down into the different 5 wives and a husband. Okay, and then we have the different business rules that we are working with. The different reasons for data quality issues. We also spoke from a data management professional as to how do we do data profiling. And this is the one that I like to come back to in terms of saying who's responsible for what. And if we go through this again, we'll see that this was what our data manager was responsible for. We certainly see our data citizen getting involved with identifying the rules, identifying critical data, prioritizing issues that are affecting them, business impact, understanding the impact, defining corrective actions. Data citizens are really critical in that area. And then making recommendations on the root cause analysis. Why, what caused the problem, and how do we fix it? We then understood that our data management professional has to be capable of dealing with most of these areas other than the top quality strategy. They almost there to do the underlying activities of DQ, and then creating most of the deliverables. So where does the data executive sit in? This is where I believe his main thrust is recommendations based on the analysis of issues. And I read a really nice interview that Dylan Jones did with James. I forget how to pronounce his surname, but what he really did was he said, as executives, we need to have a good understanding of all of the issues that the organization is facing and DQ issues, and he shouldn't be caught when execs ask a question, why is this data bad, or why can't we trust this data, he should be able to have at his fingertips, these are the reasons. Not he shouldn't be caught on the back foot. He should know what the quality issues are, and when it gets raised, he should be able to say, guys, this is why we need data quality. We've looked at it, we've got these challenges, and this is what we need to do. That sort of challenge that we have when we present numbers and people say, oh, but those numbers don't look right, and your answer is, oh, I'm going to have to look at it. That's a negative situation. That's being on the back foot. The exec needs to be on the front foot. He needs to be able to understand the challenges that the organization's facing with data, and whatever opportunity he gets, he needs to be able to explain to the execs why they need data quality. And it's all about the business side of it. And then, of course, the data quality strategy. Okay, so those are basically the essential concepts that we spoke about. And then when we drill down into the role of the exec on ensuring trustworthiness, whatever big step the company is going to have to take in climbing the mountain, they have to be there, they have to be guided, and we need to be able to get through this. All right, so these are the questions, the DQ questions, the why questions. And remember, I really believe that the exec is about answering why do we need data quality. And then it's also about why do we need it now. There can be all sorts of history and failed opportunities that have happened, and the exec needs to convince the people around him that we actually need to do something about it and we can't just ignore it. And irrespective of the failures that have gone before us, we need to be able to address it. And then, of course, it's similar to master data is, why is this a business issue? And why does the business need to get actively involved? Not just a case of, it's an IT problem and we'll fix it. The execs need to get involved, and they need to take responsibility about the quality of data. And I always love listening to a lawyer who has so many interactions with different companies, and a lot of it's about so they've made a decision, and then something goes wrong and they get hauled into court, and then the lawyer comes along and then he has to sort of backdate all of the decision making and then understand whether due diligence was paid attention to. And he actually said it's the number of times that he has to convince the executive that data quality or the quality of decision making starts at the exec level. They are the authors of data quality within the organization. Or let's not just refer to it as data quality. I think it's decision making quality or decision quality. If they do not tolerate data that's just slapped together and incorrect stuff, and they put the right focus, I think they would then be able to answer, why did they make that decision? What was the due diligence that was done? Because looking at it afterwards, after the fact, and you're in court and you're trying to justify why you made those decisions and led to the impact, now it's a little bit harder. So, and that was a lawyer telling me that his constant advice to CEOs is to start paying attention to the quality, not when there's a court case, but when it happens every day on these decisions, because they'll have to back it up and they'll have to take care of this situation. Okay. So yeah, the execs, the CDO and the data executive needs to constantly make the execs aware of why data quality is so important. And we had a session on Monday with Marita, and I loved her comment about asking these important questions. Is the question that we need to be able to answer from data execs is, how does your data make money and in some cases lose money? Okay, so the answer to the why data quality is dependent on how data is making or losing money to the organization, and how could it make more money. So this is, I believe, the crux and the message that the execs have to keep on giving to everybody in the organization to get the buy-in for data quality. It's every single step, all the business and relating to money and the impact on money. So this was a slide from Marita's presentation. I prefer to call this a value proposition. This is our value purpose, and it goes to the different customer segments. If you remember, she had a business canvas. Who are the customers? What are their segmentations? What are the channels? And what are our revenue streams? Now, we can't go and explain data quality in terms of the data itself. We have to explain data quality in terms of the impact that it's having on the business model. Now, I really like this approach that I use in terms of data governance, in terms of doing a SWOT analysis. But the first thing that we realize when we do data governance and data strategy is building a data strategy, which I keep trying to make people aware of. It's not the same as the data management strategy. So how do we make money? That's what I refer to as the business strategy. How do we make money with data is what I refer to as the data strategy. Okay, and in the data strategy, we'll look at our SWOTs, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but we take the lens of data. So how do we enhance the strengths of our business using data? How do we manage the weaknesses in our data? So what's the friction that the businesses are experiencing with our data? How do we take advantages through data? So data is going to give us opportunities that we haven't seen before. And then how do we mitigate the risks of data? So we've seen data privacy, data protection, all of those things. And how do we look at the risk side of data? And with that, we can build our data quality strategy, okay? Which I believe is a sub-element of the data strategy. Once we've identified all these issues in a data strategy, we can say, okay, how does DQ get involved in this strength, this weakness, this opportunity, and this risk? How do we bring data quality into the game? Okay. All right, so let's take these different areas and sort of break them down. And what I'm trying to do here is to give the executives a way to see how they can communicate the story of data quality. So if we're going to enhance the strengths, so we're doing a great job, but we can improve on it. Now, we all know that we can improve on data. I mean, if there's not many of us that have perfect data, and the type of things that you may have picked up in the previous discussion is certainly the accuracy. How accurate is our data with respect to the real world? Please, I'm not now referring to how accurate is your ETL data to the application data. That's an internal thing. That's something that we just have to get right. But how accurate is the data with respect to the real world? And the better our accuracy, the stronger our strengths are going to be. How complete is the data? How timeliness is how quick and how relevant is the data to what's happened yesterday or the day before? And that's referred to timeliness. We've got to reduce the latency of our data. And then trustworthiness of the data, how believable is the data and the message that it's saying, or the story that we're presenting? How believable is it? Nice metric there to have believability and how business believes the information that they're getting. Okay, so then how do we manage our weaknesses? Marita, in terms of talking about data modeling, she spoke about hidden data. And that's where data quality comes in terms of accessibility. And she mentioned several examples of data models where they couldn't find customer segmentation. They didn't have it, and they found it stuck away in some cases in the CRM system, and in that they were referring to the financial agent rather than the customer. So a lot of times their customer was the financial agent who almost was providing the money and not the customer in the background. So Where's the hidden data sitting around? And in some cases, I would like to suggest we also have insufficient data. So we don't truly understand the cause and effect. And a lot of the times that's caused from the grain of our data. So what level are we collecting the data? And I'm going to go through a case study just to show you how that impacts some of the business decision making. And then, is our data costing us? So are we making wrong decisions based on our data? The exec should be picking this up, the data executive, and he should be saying, well, here is a case. This is a case study. When you made that last decision, you made it based on the wrong data, and that's the justification for data quality. And if the exec can constantly present back to the other business people, the other business executives, the challenges they are facing and the reason for it, he's got a much better opportunity to justify and make a case for data quality. And then the other one that's costing us is we're unable to make decisions based on the data we have. So they just don't give us that right level of insight. And so that's how data costs us, and that's the weakness that we have within our data. Okay, so how do we take advantage of data? Opportunities that we're not aware of. We've just had a fantastic case study that JG and I have done, and we were asked to do some analysis, and we picked up something that nobody knew about. And it's those opportunities, and we'll take you through some of that, those opportunities that get brought about when we start to study the data. And of course, the best way for decision making is when we have multiple options. When you only have one option, it's a bit of a no-brainer. That's all we can do. And I believe when we provide business with more options, that's when we get and we show the value of our data, and that's how we can make money with data. This is a fantastic approach, and it's lovely to see it when it actually transpires. It's lovely to see that coming through. And of course, good quality data supports this. Okay, so this is the case study that I wanted to talk through. Are there any questions in terms of that background that I provided? How does the exec operate? His focus. He needs to be preparing case studies. He needs to be explaining everything about data quality in this. Yes, Debbie.
Hi, yes, I have a question. What does CIT mean?
Okay. All right. Sorry, I suppose we've been working with this data for so long. This CIT stands for cash in transit. Okay. So this is, and you may have guessed that if you've been around in some of the cash business, and you can see G4S and SPV. So a lot of it's about banks that are distributing money to different parts of the country. Norman?
Yeah, hi, Howard. Hi,
How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. This is my first session with yourselves. I've been working overseas, so more used to the data management seminars there.
Yeah.
So what I've picked up, I just like to share this based on the slides that you went through. First of all, very important part is when one speaks about data quality issues, people must not be in the mindset that that's something for IT to own and manage and fix. It's exclusively for business, because business are the owners, not IT. And businesses should have their own frameworks in place, which you then have your owners and stewards and so on else. And certainly IT will be engaged with, but that's playing a supporting role. Secondly, the data that is profiled. My experience, it should always be at the lowest, most granular form possible. That way, you can always drill right through for your root cause analysis. And then on the why part, maybe in the UK it's simpler there from a regulatory aspect. It's quite rigidly enforced, and clients I was working at, when I had to sell to them, and you're right, you start at the highest level within the organization, then come down. But my homework was already done for me that these organizations had faced fines from the certain Office of Water and that. So, but then as well, it's selling to the owners and stewards and everyone within the organization. What is in it for them if they have assurance, confidence in the information that they hold, and it's right down to their pocket in saying bonuses. And something else. And I just wanted to mention as well. I'll be extremely quick here. RACI matrix is extremely effective. Everyone then knows what's expected of them, who is responsible for what. And then on the value side, along with potential to lose clients, customers, and bear in mind it costs more to onboard than to retain, it's brand name, planning and forecasting with confidence, and then your analytics are more effective and reliable. So these I find are quite valid points when I speak with business. I just wanted to share that.
Oh, that's great, Norman. Thank you. I really like your input. And that's, there were a couple of things that you made, some great points. Certainly the RACI, that's what we've tried to do with these data managers or DQ managers, our data citizens, which tend to be our users of data, our data professionals, what is their role, and then the executives. And you are right, it is a job to get back into the realm of business, that they take active involvement on it, because the IT guys can't, and hopefully with this business case that I'll show now, one can start seeing some of the impact. And a lot of the system that we put together was designed really to just collect money and to notify the collection companies that they needed to do a pickup. So the system had a certain specification, and now there's a different set of questions that are coming out, and all of a sudden the things that were important or the things that weren't important are now very important. And I remember actually doing a DQ review or profiling of this data almost 3-4 years ago, and the business, and when we presented it back to the business, and it was a customer of the software company, they said they don't see the value of doing it. Now they do. So thank you for that input. It's very important what the points that you've made. I appreciate your input.
Nice one. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So this is a case study for cash in transit. Thanks, Debbie, for asking that question. And as you can see, you've got here by province the sort of this is a value. The size of the bubble refers to the value. This is on the Western Cape, and we can see the different providers that are providing services to one of the banks that we work with. There's a few people involved. And then when we drill down from the region, we get down to a cash center city. And so we can start seeing some of the different distributions of this cash center collection business. But what's important to notice is you can certainly see that the high value is sitting within Gauteng, makes sense, and the lower value is sitting out in the different regional areas. And one has to start asking the question now is to say, well, is the or maybe I should take a step back. The question that we were asked is to help the business is to say, after COVID and after all the challenges, the profitability of cash and cash in transit is going down. They're not doing as well as they used to do, and I think we've all seen that, haven't we? Where shops and retailers are starting to force in card payment, and people are not that keen on cash. So the requirement for cash in transit is dropping off dramatically, and they're having to ask these questions of what do we do? You know, we've got these merchants all over the place, and can we stop servicing them? Now, it's a really difficult thing, and Norman brought it up as to how do we look after the existing customers, and this is going to impact our existing customers. They in some cases have to stop servicing those customers. Now, there's all sorts of challenges about outlying areas because you've also got big companies like Build, the warehouses and that can have customers all over the country, and they've gone into this in terms of saying, well, this organization will collect money from wherever their branches are. So the impact is high. They could be impacting a chain, and it's not just a single merchant sitting in Pofar, as an example. But notice this area of the country is it's very wide, and they don't have a lot of cash centers there, and that's an interesting observation that we're getting. So the question is, which merchants can we stop servicing to reduce the costs? So we thought, well, this is relatively easy. We can look at a value and volume, so least volume analysis by service provider, by merchant. So the service provider is these are the 4 service providers. They go down into a cash center, and what we were unable to do is to click down a grain to the actual devices. And I'll show you some of the challenges we faced with those devices. So you could have a merchant in the middle of nowhere, and the trucks are going out to service and collect cash, and they're spending a lot of money going out to service that individual. And if it's a mom and pop shop, then one could certainly look at stopping your service and just saying it's not worthwhile. But whereas if it's a massive company like the different distribution companies that we have, that impact could be not as well tolerated as we expect. So the first thing we wanted to do was let's just do a least volume analysis. So let's just analyze the volume of the data. And we did that, and we looked at the value, and we then looked at the number of collections. And the fascinating thing was that we noticed this massive change in the one company, the Blue Line company, that was doing an extreme amount of collections, and then it dropped off dramatically. And we noticed how this thing dropped off, but interestingly enough, they retained a similar value distribution. So something happened with this company, and all of a sudden they were doing a lot less collections, but they were maintaining their value ratio, which is fascinating. You start asking yourself, and this is the opportunity I was referring to, you start asking yourself, well, if one company can do this, and still keep the value, then why can't our other companies do it? So here we have a dark blue line that was operating, still had a lot of collections, but the value wasn't as high. So that was a fascinating thing that no one knew about. No one realized that SPV were operating differently. And it was like, okay, but why and how are they operating differently? And of course, we've now led to different hypotheses that we're putting forward, but we're starting to say, well, this is interesting. If SPV can make this radical change, is there something we can learn about what they're doing, and then it's almost establish a best practice? Now, our problem is our data doesn't give us enough information. We don't know what they did. We just know that they've reduced the collections and they've maintained the value. Okay, notice the value that has stayed the same along this area. So it's a fantastic observation, but we don't have enough detail in our data. Okay, but nice to see that all of a sudden the opportunities are, well, we don't have to cancel. We may be able to reduce our collections and keep the values. So what you can notice here in terms of the trends, notice that we are reducing our collections over time. The values maintained pretty consistently, and it's predominantly been through one company that's achieved this collection reduction. And then when we were able to, we must admit we battled to get this right. We had to do a lot of fixing of the data and changing of the data. And we noticed some other patterns where the Western Cape, notice how it's doing a lot less collections and almost keeping the same value compared to KwaZulu-Natal. And if we look at Limpopo, who's generating for almost the same number of collections, they're generating half the value. Okay, now I'm sure you guys are thinking, and we all sat and thought about this, is it due to the infrastructure? Is it the distances that people are driving? And I'm sure you saw there that the Western Cape had a wider range of distance that it needed to track. But notice the ratios, and we started to understand that there's this value versus effort ratio that we needed to design. Of course, Gauteng has got the highest value and highest collections, but is the ratio as good as that we're seeing in the Western Cape? So fantastic. We really loved this. We really loved the energy that we got out of fixing the data of the cash centers. Unfortunately, the number of cash centers was small, so we could make a quick adjustment in that. But when it got to the devices, this is so much data we can't really fix. And so we just to share a little bit with you, this is the structure. We have a CIT provider. They have a cache center, and then from the cache center we have the device location. Now this data is there, but the quality of the data is not what we wanted. So to give you just an example here, this was sort of what we had to start with, a cache center location, and with some help, we were able to quickly derive the city that we were based in, and we were able to break it down a lot better. So East Rand is difficult. What city are you in? And we were able to pinpoint it into Johannesburg, and then we were able to add more metadata to it, as to say, is it an urban area? Is it outlying? And we were able to get better addresses. So the first time we put this on a map, the data was all over. We were sitting in America. We were sitting all over the place, and we battled. And you can see some of the names that are here, like the Suncoast Casino. When you try to put that on a map, it goes into some interesting places. But we were able, with some effort, to quickly do the cache center location. What we did realize is that the device location is a lot harder. Okay, so lots of benefit out of that, and we were able to get almost our first click, the quality on our first click down, and we could start working out differences between KwaZulu-Natal, Western Cape, and you could see that coming up. In the first time, we weren't able to understand that. But this is unfortunately what our device data looks like. Yeah, we were able to get Johannesburg out of it, but it was guessing a lot of the times. And you can see we had Johannesburg and Pretoria, but then we had PTA, we had George, we had some interesting cities, and you'll obviously notice that there was no validation. And the reason there was no validation was, well, it wasn't required. And we've been looking at ways of guessing, of guessing the city, so we can understand. And our big challenge is the cost or the ineffectiveness of some of the providers, because they're driving long routes and they're getting small values. And we sort of battling to answer that question. So through that, we've started to talk about some options, and the software providers said that 45% of the devices have modems that can provide accurate location information. And we now at this bridge in terms of saying, do we go to this next level to get this next set of data, or do we ask the business to go to that level and sort it out for us? So will we get sufficient insight from 45%, or do we get more questions? At 55% of the device location will need to be fixed by a business. IT has no idea. If you look at this, I really can't make a decision on what this is. I can do some fuzzy matching, but I could probably get hazy view, but it's actually in Heidelberg. So we can do it, but then business will need to vet it. We can do some fuzzy matching, then we'll have to get business to validate it. We can hire some temps to do it. But it's a really critical business decision, and we need to do a good job of it. And I suppose the software vendor is trying to say, well, can we help them with the data we have and the data we've been collecting? Can we help them make a decision? So this was the case study that we've been through. We realized that so much of this relates to the quality of the data they have. They can see some of the trends, but they can't explain completely why SPV has done such a great job in terms of its collections to the different devices. We can do a volume analysis by merchant, but because we don't know where that merchant sits, we can't always relate it in that scenario. The other thing that is we've provided them with this option to achieve the same value with reduced collection costs. And the other option that this data insight has done is that we could now create an industry benchmark and then say to our providers, why are you performing so well? Or in the other side, why are you performing so badly with respect to this benchmark? So some really nice discussions that can be had with those providers, because the financial service, the bank that's operating, they just say go and collect the money, and they're getting billed for all those collection costs, and so the profitability of their business is deteriorating due to the ineffective collection fees. Okay, so this is why we need the data quality. This is why we need data that covers the scope. We can get so far, but we can't get down to the devices. And now we're sort of at a guessing level. And now we also at a quandary of, do we try to get that next 50%? Do we try to go that next level? Why do we need it now? Well, we can't explain why some of the providers are doing so well in keeping the value and reducing their collection. So it may be able to alleviate our decision to reduce our merchants, but to do a better job with the providers in terms of improving the collection rate or the collection versus value ratio. Why do business need to worry about the DQ? Well, I think it's pretty simple. IT doesn't need to make this decision in terms of maintaining the profitability. This is purely a business decision. They can't make it with the insights that they've currently got, and they don't know how to decide which merchants come and which merchants go, which merchants stay, what sort of non-emotive or it must be a quantitative analysis. And certainly business and IT can't make the decisions on how that affect how we make money. We can provide insights and we can provide options, but we can't make those decisions. And that goes to what Norman is saying, is that this is in the realm of business. IT can only support to a certain level, and that's it. Okay, so that's sort of the presentation today. I hope that the case study has given you a little bit more insight in terms of how important this is to business, and how with a lack of information we just can't get to that bottom level of detail. And now we have a decision of do we go much further? Do we keep on going? Do we try to get other sources of data, or how are we going to approach this? I don't know if there are any questions or any observations, any comments. Yes, Norman.
Hi. Well, I'd be sort of keen to actually reach out to SBV and ask them, knowing that it's in the best interest of all parties, and possibly, as you said, building in standards now, ask them what is it that they changed, and maybe they're not even aware that they've changed anything. Yeah,
you're right. You're right. But you know what I loved about this exercise was that we weren't even thinking that. We didn't even recognize that this was an option. But you are right. So now the next steps are can we go and talk to some of the providers and understand?
Yeah. Cool.
Bryn?
Yeah, thanks, Howard. Just wanted to make a comment around the business versus IT, and absolutely, business has a massive role to play. There's no question about it. IT, you say, is supportive, but it's actually pretty critical. So, stepping back to, is it a business problem? Is it an IT problem? Well, it's actually everyone's problem, because data belongs to the organization. But where IT really can help is to kickstart things and get things going. Business generally doesn't have a clue, in terms of how to tackle data quality. And one of the most fundamental things is data quality measurement and monitoring. Putting numbers to it in terms of percentages around correctness or the various dimensions, etc., etc. And that's where IT certainly steps in and can build systems to enable data quality metrics to be produced so that everyone can understand what they're working off. If you're not measuring it, you obviously cannot control it. So that's a very critical component that IT needs to provide up front. And then later on down the track, there might be things like the fuzzy matching you're talking about, or programmatic standardization, those sorts of things. So, it's not that it's not IT's problem. It's everyone's problem, but IT plays an incredibly foundational and supportive role in moving the whole issue forward and improving data quality.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, Bryn. I think part of what I was working through here was a scenario where the executive needs to get that buy-in, that awareness, and he needs to get that change to come about. And what I found interesting was that, and I agree with you, it's everyone's data. Now, in this current state, within this business case, there's very little that IT can do to fix the current problem. And the ball is sitting squarely in the hands of business. And yes, we can, it's interesting, we actually went back to them almost, I said 3 years ago, and we asked them to do this improvement, and they rejected it. They said they don't see there's value in that. Of course, and that's where the exec needs to come in and help convince them that they do need to pay attention and they do need to invest a little bit more. So it's this challenge that I think execs and we all face as professionals is really getting that stakeholder buy-in and recognition to say, okay, I get what you're saying. I get why we need to spend money. I know I do lots of development, and in the heat of the moment and the desperate desire to deliver, there have been so many cases where I've recommended that we institute data quality, and they said, not now, we must get functionality out. And unfortunately, that technical debt that we get into just hangs around and keeps on going. By your point entirely, it's all our data. I suppose what I say when I build that data strategy is what are the weaknesses in our data. IT needs to show the business where the weaknesses are and give them an idea. But it's so helpful when an exec has these case studies, and especially a data exec has the case studies of what data quality is and what it can mean to these type of decision makers, and just make them see it. I don't know if that.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Yeah, it's around IT playing a role in terms of, as you say, showing what the issues are, and putting that in a format that execs can understand, and that normally comes down to numbers.
Yeah.
Those numbers normally should involve money, and then the business are the ones who can actually decide what to do about it. Simplistically, IT can help, from a preventing issues from happening.
Correct.
Comes down to having done cause analysis, etc. Yeah, so it's a collaboration.
Yeah, Andrew, I agree. I suppose I've been, especially because I live in the world of BI, I live in these scenarios where we rush to get the end result, and then we say no, but we must look after the DQ and the quality and and then we have these debates, and until you've got some really good examples of these things that you can talk to them about, DQ remains the realm of data management professionals and not business. And there's that transition that we need to work on in getting them to partner with us and making it our data and fixing it.
Sure, fully agreed.
Thanks, Bryn. Thanks for your feedback. Okay. Any other questions? Mr. Bolton, do you see some of this? Rabul, yeah, from India, Dama, India. How are you doing, sir? I really liked your presentation. It was 2 weekends ago, hey?
Yes, Howard. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, Howard. So my question is, how can we measure the business impact due to the low data quality or low quality of data? Means we may losing business, right?
Yes.
So how, means in industry, is there any framework currently there that to measure the business loss, or for any kind of area, like in retail or maybe in finance area? How can we measure the loss of business, or in terms of means, because data is considered as an asset, so if we are not maintaining like asset, the quality like asset, then obviously there is an impact on the business. So how can we measure the loss of the business for the low data quality?
It's a great question, and I think we were referring to this as well in terms of our data asset valuation, and we actually had a similar discussion on moving to insights monetization and not so much data monetization. I do believe that this is sort of where I positioned our data exec and the CDO, is that when they come onto the scene, they have to constantly, by understanding how business makes money, we can also understand what the cost of losing business or making bad decisions. And we almost, in a way, need to have a real life monitoring system where when we do make mistakes and we do make errors, we have a more detailed analysis. So it's very similar to that review that one can do in terms of the end of projects. What did we do badly? Where did we make a mistake? The exec has to get involved in reviewing the cost to business for making a bad decision based on bad data. So where he detects that we didn't have enough data, like this one, for example, as the case study, it's still got some way to roll out. He needs to almost follow the story to the end game and be able to say, okay, we made a decision, it cost us so much, this was the impact that we had, and it was due to the lack of data down to the device level. That was the area that, now again, he has to follow it and he has to keep track of this and constantly keep measuring what the impact of this bad data has, so that when they put a case study together, he can explain that and he's got the numbers. And he has to just work with that through that process. I don't think there is I mean, a lot of the times we look at the cost of bad data in terms of how much it costs us in terms of people and processes to measure what it's costing us to fix the data. And that's just a fixing point of view. We don't always have a good way of understanding the impact of business, and that it's really about our value proposition and how we've undermined our value proposition. So I have, who else there? Some other questions that are coming up. I think it was, let me just see here. Panda, go on. Sorry, I'm not sure. Yes.
Howard. Yeah, Howard. It's a very good presentation about the 3 Ws on data quality side. So I want to understand if we start a data quality value proposition. So how we can evaluate the ROI of a data quality program from the business perspective?
Yeah, I think that it's a good thing remember we spoke about when you establish these practices like data quality, data governance, one establishes a scorecard. And in that scorecard, we relate it to the data strategy. So an example there was, if I have SWOTs, you need to be able to quantify the SWOTs. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are the risks? You need to be able to provide a quantitative analysis of those things. And then you need to look at saying, when data quality fixes and removes or enhances a strength or removes a weakness or a risk and provides opportunity, you need to be able to keep track of that, and the exec needs to be able to have these stories of what DQ was responsible for fixing. So you had these SWOTs, and if I address this, and I can link my SWOT to those areas. Does that answer your question?
Yes, actually, I want to know if you have any framework for that or any.
Yes, I do.
Yes,
I do.
Yes.
I use some segment analysis, K-mean segment analysis of my SWOTs in my data strategy, and then I try to link my data quality strategy to my data strategy that links to those SWOTs. And the metrics are how many business friction elements have you removed and what's your return on investment. And you can keep track of when the business tell you they've got issues, you keep track of how you fix those issues.
Okay. Thanks, Howard.
All righty. Di?
Yeah. Hi again. To go back to, I think 2 questions back about the effects or the impacts of poor data quality, and it's one of my favorite topics, root cause analysis, because that's not just about looking at causes and root causes. It's got to further explore the effects and the impacts. So, and out of that, you can drive your return on investment if you fix the problem. Yeah, so it's about delving into all of the effects and the impacts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Howard. Great session.
Yeah, very true. I think we must extend our view of that impact assessment, not just to be the fact that my data model is weak or my application didn't code it, because in this scenario, in my CIT scenario, the application wasn't expected to it, and 3 years ago the business didn't believe in it, and they weren't willing to pay for an upgrade on that thing. So we've already had identified it, and they said we're not interested. Now all of a sudden they got some difficult decisions, and that probably that investment would have been beneficial to them. JG, I see you joined. Is there anything? I'm not sure if you picked up on some of it.
No, Howard, I'm far too late to even comment, and so apologies. I'll watch the video.
Because what I did do, and JG was responsible for working with me on that case study. So these are just explaining how we need to look at the money and what the cost of that was, and just showing the people that our problem in our case study was the fact that because we don't have that next level of detail on our device data, we've got some really interesting observations, but we can't explain them. So we can't sort of take it to the next level, and we can't explain why some are doing better than the other in terms of these different ratios that we were really able to show them, but we don't have enough information, and just explain some of the dirty data that we're sitting with, and the possible options of, do we get sufficient insight from the next 45%? Do we look at fuzzy matching? Do we then get the business to validate it? And that was sort of the discussion that we had. But what a nice case study of the impact of the lack of complete data that covers the scope, and in some cases the lack of dirty data, where you just can't take it to that next level to give business sufficient information to make a decision.
Yeah, awesome, Howard. Thank you. I mean, that really summarizes the challenge that the client has. And so, yeah, but what I did feel that wins through this process is that the client will be looking at their master data in a completely different way going forward, because they really do start to appreciate the way that they can monetize that investment.
Yeah, and the lovely thing that I also pointed out was this situation of what a lovely way of justifying data quality through new opportunities. Okay, so we've seen the opportunity, we've seen where one service provider is doing a much better job. We would love to now look at creating a best practice or a blue line that we can measure others to, and so there's an opportunity that they've probably never seen before. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the client almost wants to engage with us more, though. The client now actually wants, the client is now pushing. It's not us anymore. It's a really nice pendulum swing. Thanks. Thanks, Howard. Thanks for sharing.
Wonderful. Any other questions? I'm not sure if I've answered all your questions.
How's it, Howard?
Yes, Paul.
I'm running solo here today, and you can hear someone freaking out in the background. But I just wanted to add. Yesterday was a scenario, wasn't directly with me, but I was told about it, where regional manager of a cargo company was visiting South Africa, doing a tour of duty out here, and just checking the business. And in a moment, they were planning a flash marketing campaign they wanted to their top 10 customers. And so they got a brand new reporting tool that brought up the numbers, and the account managers and team just started arguing, saying, no, that's not right. That's not right. It shouldn't be there. This one, man, and it just completely blew the potential of what they're trying to achieve through the reporting out the water. And everybody was frustrated. He was mad with the person that drew the report, where the person didn't have control over what's in there right now. Man, it was and so just a scenario of the negative of this, if it's not taken care of and looked at.
And it's then this impact, right? So and there are bad situations, but it's almost now that the data exec has to take the stand and say, guys, we never want that to happen again. And
100%.
what do we need to do to prevent it from happening again? Not just get rid of the BI developer or whatever it is, but what was the root cause? As Dai said, what is the impact? And now we look at ways of preventing that from happening. But Ragul, I don't know if I answered your question properly in terms of measuring the impact on the business impact. Is there a framework? I think it's on a cost and an opportunity loss or benefit or increase that we have to do it. And we as professionals have to keep on coming back to how does our work relate to the business and how they make money so that we can relate that. Okay. Guys, thank you so much. I don't think there are any more questions unless there are. Paul, over to you.
Thanks, Howard. Thanks, everybody. I've got to shoot. I've got a problem this side.
Okay. All right, sir.
I really appreciate everything. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.